like to introduce Paola Vargas, who's going to tell us her story.
Yes. How are you, everyone? I'm very happy to see many familiar faces and a lot of new faces. So I'm Laura Vargas. I'm a senior partner at Perte Consulting, and I work together with David and Pentti. Congratulations, Pentti. Feliz cumpleaños. I am the token Costa Rican, and every Huipotimi should have at least one Costa Rican in their team. I highly recommend that. So I came to Finland 14 years ago with my husband, and we also have 2 small children. And I've spent the last 20 years, so this May I celebrated 20 years in professional life, working for large, global, complex organizations. The last company I worked with before I joined Perte was 120,000 people, and we produced 22 billion euros in revenue that year. It was highly complex. We were delivering to clients on models that went follow the sun around the globe. And hopefully what we will share today with you in terms of how to build a global, agile, and intelligent organization also reflects some of that learning. Our agenda for today is that one thing we know is that change is constant. We heard that from the speakers this morning. We will hear that from us again. And the second part, what we would like to do with you, is look for an answer together to this question that we have posed.
So, in some ways, our presentation is going to be, this is not funny. My question here is this still true? So we were listening this morning to what sounded like the death of Taylorism. But is our language and the way that we look at organizations actually still really stuck in the past? Do we have anybody in their organizations that talk about inputs and outputs, productivity, efficiency? Do we have performance management? Even people are described as resources in human resources. So listening this morning, I think that way to work in organizations is changing, and organizations are changing. So to answer the question, what do we need to do to build the global, agile, intelligent organization? Maybe we should think a little bit about what is happening in organizations. So what did we hear this morning? Organizations are getting flatter, and the boundaries are changing. We insource and outsource. We have supply chaining, we have partnerships, alliances, and probably the most used word this morning would be something around collaboration or collective. So actually, do you know who you really work for? I have a friend who works for a well-known, not Finnish, telecom organization. He was made redundant a couple of years ago, and then he was rehired 6 months later. Guess what happened? 6 months later, he was rehired again and then made redundant again. Yeah, very amusing. You can guess the end of the story. He was rehired once more and then he sold to an American organization. So this morning we've been talking about meaning and purpose and creating meaning and purpose in the workplace. If we need to do that, we need to answer the question, what are we in business for? And to answer that question, maybe we should think about what is our organization today? What do they look like? And I would say that the language that we use is still stuck very much in the model of the organization as a machine.
Yeah. So that language needs to evolve, and we need to think about who gets excited about performance management. Yeah? So do we want to create some excitement in the workplace? We probably should rethink how we're calling these processes that are supposed to be driving our bottom line. So what is happening with the language then?
I think that we're hearing some of the language that we need in the workplace in the presentations already today, but are they actually happening in the workplace? So in Penty's presentation, he talked about getting away from the model of command, control and correct in leadership, the 3 C's. But is that actually happening? We still talk in organisations in hierarchical terms. So we talk about organisations have subordinates and superiors. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't like the idea of thinking that I am subordinate. The idea of being superior is possibly attractive, but I have my colleagues to keep me, on level ground with this one. So if the language of organisations is still stuck in the machine age, I would say that the language around leadership is still very much stuck in military models.
And I think here we also want to highlight and connect to Penty's discussion this morning that it is the whole human that comes to work. So while we might be able to sometimes, on occasion, leave our phone at home or leave even our laptops at home, when we come to work, we actually cannot leave our emotions behind, and we certainly cannot leave our values behind. So it is the whole human that comes to work. So how is it that we change our language to tap into that whole humanity? What kind of organizations could we design so that we can exploit and explore that full potential of the human being? And that's what we're thinking about today.
So if we want to move towards a more human society, as we heard this morning, then maybe we could start by thinking about human-oriented organizations and human leadership.
So an interesting piece of research that we want to share with you today is an article written by Rita Gunther McGrath from Columbia Business School. And she set out with her team to find out what is it that growth outliers have in common. And she put this defined growth outliers as being organizations with a $1 billion market capitalization, which had performed more than 5% growth per year for 10 years, 1999 to 2009. And she found out that regardless of industry, location, geography, what you do for a living, she found out that there are two areas in which you can distinguish growth outliers.
Champions of stability, and there we need the continuity and we need the connection. So focus management attention on culture and shared values. Have we heard that message already today? Keep their senior leadership stable. Now, I think that might mean mentally stable, but maybe we don't change the management team too often. Hold on to their talent so we keep the key people. Don't change the high-level strategies quickly. So we have our vision, we have our strategy of how we're going to reach the vision, and we should stay steady to that at the high level over time and avoid dramatic divestitures, which can change the company organization rather quickly.
Right. And if we connect then to Mikko's point about being risk averse, these companies, the rapid adapters, were very risk prone. So they want to be active in making acquisitions. They want to make small early bets and diversify a portfolio. Very interestingly, they didn't have annual processes. They didn't have annual performance management, annual strategy planning, all those out the door. They had more quarterly type of processes, and they did evaluations and rewards that were also done on a quarterly basis. So their processes had speed and flexibility. And finally, but very importantly, and hopefully this will also connect with Susanna and Petri later on, they had built innovation into their operations. Doesn't that sound exciting? How do we build in innovation into what we do?
So disruption and continuity are in balance. In summary, to answer, here's a quick answer then to the question, how do you build the global, agile, intelligent organization? You have global, intelligent, agile leadership. And if we think about the research then, it means we need clarity and common understanding around three things. First of all, the vision. Where are we going? Secondly, the strategy, which tells us how we're going to get there. And then lastly, around the values, the culture. And that tells us who we are and also how we're going to work. Is there anybody here that works for an organisation that doesn't have values? So we all know what we're talking about. Corporate values, organisational values. So here's a quick quiz question for you. Whose values are these? Respect, integrity, communication, and excellence. Yes. Whose values? Well, they're very close to Nestor Jacobs.
Right.
They're very. Yes, I know. Yes, they are close. The E for excellence is in there. The R in Nestor Jacobs is actually responsibility.
Yeah.
So you're close with that. Laura has the answer.
So no more guesses. These were the values that represented a company that doesn't exist anymore. It's called Enron. Does anybody remember Enron? Early 2000s? Do you remember what happened to them?
So you have the same values as Enron. Congratulations. The future looks bright.
So while they were touting that respect and integrity were part of their values, they actually created the most systematic accounting fraud that we have seen in modern day. So it's not enough to have these really nice looking values, very simple, just one word, only four, easy to remember, easy on the brain. But we actually have to do something with these values. We have to put them in action. And who should be putting these values into action? Is that the job of the CEO and the management team? If that's the only thing they have to do, that'd be great. But the implementation of the values is something that needs to be done across the entire organization. And what we think here about is shared leadership, that everybody in the organization has a responsibility to actually deliver on these values. So each one of us in each of our organizations are delivering the values in the way we work, in the way we relate to our colleagues, in the way we service our clients, in the way that we operate inside the community. So we want to live these values, and the whole organization lives the values, not just the top team. So leadership role models the behaviors. Shared leadership is a very important idea here. We're all sharing the leadership responsibility by living the values and understanding very clearly how our work connects to them, how our work brings meaning to those values. Why is that important? We found out in another piece of research, very interesting research, done by Deloitte. They published a report called Global Trends 2014, and they went out and asked in 94 countries, they asked 2,500 executives and HR leaders representing 2,500 companies, what is it that is most urgent in their companies for the future? And I don't know if it is surprising or not, but these companies were saying that leadership development is their top priority. It's their urgent need number one. Is it because they've understood that it's this leadership that actually delivers the values, that delivers the strategy, that delivers the shared vision? So this is very interesting finding for us as well. If that's where we need to focus our energy and attention in developing this intelligent leadership, where we accept and acknowledge that the whole human being comes to work. And so we're not just tapping into the rational intelligence of the human being, but also the emotional intelligence and the spiritual intelligence and the cultural intelligence of the people who come to work. What does that finding mean to you, David?
It was pretty interesting. So there's a great need for leadership development programs.
Yay!
Yay! So we already heard in public and in private sectors. So we heard something this morning about executive education and where it may or may not be taking place. But it's probably the number one way that, for example, a new CEO in an organisation is the main way that they can make a difference in that company. So, and as Laura has said, it has to be shared leadership today. So this is our definition of leadership. Leadership is about putting the values and the strategy into action to take us towards that shared vision. What are the drivers? Some of these things we have been hearing this morning. Some drivers for the need for a new kind of leadership.
So we think about globalization here. We compete in the globe, and if we think that here in Finland we're really a small part of the puzzle, and probably most of the growth will come from elsewhere, mostly from developing nations. Globalization and the developing of cultural intelligence is key for our leaders today. So we need to become even more culturally intelligent. Then we think about data and how transparent it should be, and how our shareholders and our employees are demanding openness and transparency.
And openness and transparency is among us. Please update on your Twitter feed what you're thinking and feeling about the programme today. So there is nowhere to hide anymore for the leaders. What else? One of the key words that I've heard today, if we put it into English, is collaboration. And this is an interesting word, collaboration, interesting in the English language. It's a word that's been rehabilitated. We didn't have any positive connotations around collaboration from, let's say, 1940s up until fairly recently. I had to give a presentation not so long ago in France on collaboration management. And on the way to France, I stopped at my mother's house. And my mother asked me what I was up to. And I said, well, I'm going to go and speak at collaboration conference about collaboration management. And she looked at me, she said, do you know anything about that? I said, well, yeah. I said, well, what do you mean? And she said, well, you're too young. Mum, what are you talking about? And she said, well, you don't remember the war. So collaboration only meant working with the enemy. So something must have changed in the workplace, that we have changed how we're using this word. And it's a fairly recent thing, last 10 years or so. What else? Digitalization. Is your boss a robot? You wish. Well, it would be wonderful, wouldn't it? You know, we'd get faster decision making, maybe better quality of decisions, and you know, maybe a more maybe a robot boss might even be more human in some cases. What else?
So we talk about the move to a more human-oriented society. I think one of the ways that we represent here that today is that we have our partners, Plan Suomi and World Vision. So we are really thinking about the whole human, the whole society, and how we're responsible to that wholeness, rather than just to one piece of it, or maybe just to profits. We're also thinking that the time frame in which we're operating is a lot faster. So when I started my career 20 years ago, I was a diplomat for the government of Costa Rica. And my speedy tools were a fax machine that printed in this really funny paper that curled up, and then the information disappeared after a while under the light. So you had to actually transfer it somewhere else. And we also had a telephone. And that was the tools, those were the tools that we worked with. Now we have immediate communication, immediate access to information, we have speed, and our time frame is more immediate. Our customers want things delivered today, they want it tailored to their specific needs, and we're thinking about the future. So the time frame is today and the future. And we also think about social media, David.
Yes.
You're a social media guru.
Thank you. So in summary, with these new communication tools and the openness and transparency, digitalization, globalization, all of these trends, we are in a new age. I don't know what to call it. We heard earlier today it's a post-industrial age. Maybe we've gone through the knowledge society. Maybe we've gone through, what? Where are we now? It could be the social age. Let's have a think about that. But in conclusion, change is speeding up and change is changing. So we need a new dialogue around leadership and organisations, and if organisations are changing and leadership is changing, what are the competencies for leaders to take us to this brave new world of 2020? So here's a moment for audience participation. We'd like you to think about this question with your neighbours for a couple of minutes. What do you think would be the most important characteristics for leaders to take us forward?